Clock says it's 10 after 3, so it is time for us to get going. Thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some time with you this afternoon. My name is Brian Carruthers. I'm the Dean of the School of Education and Human Services at Bob Jones University. And so my wife and I made the trek out west yesterday, and we love this part of the country. Just love the scenery. We went down and tried to explore a little bit of Mount Rainier National Park yesterday afternoon, and they closed up early because it was snowing. So didn't get to see as much as I would have liked, but it was great to be able to do that. So let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Gracious Father, we're thankful for your faithfulness. Thank you, Lord, so much for the Christian schools in this area of the country. We thank you, Lord, for their faithfulness. We thank you, Father, for how you are using them, Lord, to impact lives. Father, we thank you for each of the teachers and the leaders that are here. And I pray, Lord, your richest blessing upon them, especially as they go back to their schools on Monday. Help them, Lord, to be able to fulfill the tasks that you've given them to do. And we'll give you the praise, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me just give you a little bit about my story. I am a native Canadian, and I came to Bob Jones University back in 1980. I was a science education major, and so finished that degree, got my master's degree in educational leadership. Got married, we moved to Miami, Florida, and I was in Florida as a teacher and then in school leadership for 8 years at a very large Christian school. We had about 1,300 students. Very diverse school, it was an open enrollment school, so a lot of Latin students, about 70 to 80% of the students were Hispanic in nature. So it was a challenge, but it was where I kind of learned a lot about education and working in a Christian school setting. Then we moved up to North Carolina. I was in North Carolina for 11 years at Falls Road Baptist Church School. And then the Lord brought us back to the university. This is my 22nd year at BJU. And so have had the privilege of being in Christian education now for over 40 years. And so I'm grateful for the privilege and the opportunity. And one of the things I enjoy most about my role at the university is doing what I'm doing right now. It's getting away from Greenville and visiting folks like you, learning about what's going on in your world, and being a help in any way that I can. I like to look at these opportunities in two ways. Number one, to share ideas and to talk through issues that you may be dealing with as a school leader, but also to be an encouragement in whatever way we can. So I hope that you'll stop by the table and visit with me. We do have a card that we're going to put in your hands. We're giving away a $100 Amazon gift card. And so if you will scan this and fill it out, then on the back side's information about our online grad programs and certificates. And then we also have a dual credit online course for juniors and seniors in your Christian school called Teachers for Tomorrow. It is designed to try and help young people learn about the teaching profession, and maybe the Lord will use this to cause them to consider. We're finding fewer and fewer young people actually looking at the teaching profession, and many times it's outside influences like mom and dad. Research says that 67% of parents would discourage their child from being a teacher, and so this is just a way to help them to consider the role of teaching. So encourage you to look at that, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Now, what I'd like to do this afternoon is we're going to talk about the role of guidance counseling or counseling within your Christian school, and I want this to be interactive, so if you have questions or something that doesn't make sense, please raise your hand, let's have a conversation. But I will ask questions as well, and so I want you to participate. So it goes both ways. I'm not going to do all the talking. I want you to help me out here as well. So let me begin by asking a question. Who are your largest stakeholders in your school? Who are your largest stakeholders? Parents, yes. But there's even a group that's larger than the parents. It's your students, right? So your students and your parents are your two largest stakeholders. By the way, what is a stakeholder? Well, how would you define that term? Look, you stole the words right out of my mouth, okay? It is a person who has a vested interest in what you're doing, okay? Now, in the fact that we're talking about parents have an interest, but they're also paying you funds for that interest. And so they have when we use the word vested interest, they have a vested interest. And remember, mom and dad are paying you tuition dollars for a service. They are looking for a return on that investment, okay? So I want you to keep that in mind because, believe it or not, I don't know that we often think of it this way, but your school is a service organization. You are providing a service to stakeholders who have a vested interest in what you are doing. So what are some of the services that you provide students and their parents? Education, right? Okay, so that's the reason they're paying dollars, is because they want Johnny to be able to move from second grade to third grade. And whatever the case may be, they may want Susie to be able to learn how to play a musical instrument, or they may want another child to be able to excel in another area. So there is something that they want from you, and it's a good education. What else do they want from you? What else are parents and students wanting from you as a school? That's all right, go for it.
Was that the first one?
Education was the first one that was mentioned.
Spiritual atmosphere.
A spiritual atmosphere, okay? Absolutely, thank you. All right, so there are choices out there, correct? All right, there are choices where mom and dad could choose to get that education. They could get it for free down the street. They could get it at a charter school, a public school. All right, they could do homeschool. All right, so there's lots of opportunities where mom and dad can get that education, but they have chosen your school. And the reason, or one of the reasons, hopefully is because quality academics, but also is because you provide those academics through a biblical worldview. Okay, so spiritual training. What else are they looking to get from you? Safe environment, absolutely, okay? They want the confidence that when they drop their child off at your school at 8 o'clock in the morning and they'll come back later that day, that their child is in a safe environment, that they're going to be cared for. All right, good. What else? Okay, they're looking for an organization that has a mission statement that is equal or is aligned with their personal value system. All right? And so, by the way, and I'm getting off topic here, I know, but does the Bible talk about, does the Bible use the word education? No, it doesn't. Okay? Now, does the Bible refer to the topic of training and education? Absolutely. Throughout the entire scripture it does, okay? By the way, who is tasked with the primary role of educating the next generation? Parents are. Mom and dad, right? And then secondarily, the church. But the Bible doesn't talk about the Christian school, does it? All right? But we believe that the Christian school comes alongside the home and the church to provide a service that mom and dad aren't able to do on their own. Okay? I'm looking for one more service that we provide, that your school provides parents and their students. Guidance. Thank you. All right? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. Mom and dad are trusting you to be able to provide information that their child needs or that they need to aid them in helping their child to be successful, not only at your school, but what comes after your school. And that's what guidance counseling is all about, isn't it? All right? Now, how many of you as a Christian school have a full-time guidance counselor? All right, I'm not surprised. Okay? Because we can't afford them, right? We can't afford to have somebody who is tasked with that role, even as much as we would like them to be. We can't afford it. But does that negate the role of providing guidance in your school? Can we say, well, I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, we can't afford this, we can't pay for it, so, sorry, we just can't do this. We don't have that luxury. We still have to provide the services of a guidance counselor to our parents and to their students, even though we may not have that particular role, okay? So what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is we're going to talk about this whole idea of guidance counseling, especially if you don't have a person in that role. But let's, for a moment, pretend that we had the resources and that we could afford to have a guidance counselor. Let's talk about what does that actually look like. All right, so if we could hire a guidance counselor, what would be the job description? Now, the reason I'm going through this is because I want you to be thinking in your mind, even though I can't hire a guidance counselor, I'm going to need somebody to do these services. This is the kind of person I'm looking for. And maybe I should rephrase that, this is the kind of persons, because this is what we call distributed labor, okay? Because many hands make light work in this role of providing guidance services. So a guidance counselor, I'm going to look at this from two aspects. We're going to look at their competency, what they are competent to do, and then we're going to look at their character. What is the character of people who are providing guidance services? So first of all, somebody who's providing services in guidance should obviously have a degree in education. They should be an educator. Not only should they be an educator, but they should have had classroom experience. Because it's difficult to talk to mom and dad about academic issues if you've had no experience in the classroom and working with children. All right? They just go together. All right? And I would strongly encourage that this individual or individuals have not only an undergrad degree, but actually a grad degree in either educational leadership and biblical counseling, or in what we would call pupil personnel services. That is kind of the specific term used to encompass educational counseling and so on. So those would be some of the competencies that I would encourage you to consider for the people that take on this role in your school. Now, what are some of the characteristics or the character of this person? Several things for you to consider. Number one, they need to be a genuinely spiritual person, because you're going to find that a person who is providing counseling in a school situation, especially a Christian school situation, is going beyond just academic counseling. There's also spiritual counseling that's going to occur. They're going to be having conversations with Johnny, who's dealing with particular issues spiritually. And maybe a parent that's coming in and saying, I don't know what to do with my child. Can you help me? They're looking to you for guidance and wisdom. And we want to be able to provide biblically based wisdom. And so the person who is providing this help needs to be a genuinely spiritual person. They need to be perceptive. In other words, they need to be able to ask the right kinds of questions and be able to draw out from the child as to what is really going on. For example, let's say that Johnny comes to whoever's providing guidance, and Johnny's really struggling in school. We've seen his grades drop. He used to be an A student, now he's getting C's and D's. He's just kind of, doesn't really have a lot of motivation, energy. And when you say, Johnny, what's going on? No big deal. But asking perceptive questions, you might find out that Johnny's parents are going through a divorce. And now he has got the weight of family issues on his shoulders, and those issues are impacting how he's performing at school. All right? And so it's being able to ask the right kinds of questions to Johnny to be able to be perceptive to get the information that would be necessary. And then a guidance counselor needs to be trustworthy. because they are going to be provided information that may need to be kept in confidence. All right? In other words, you don't want this person going to the teacher's lounge and saying, oh, by the way, guess what? I just had a conversation with so-and-so and da-da-da-da-da. Then it becomes gossip, right? And we don't want that to occur. But on the other hand, there may be times when you are given information that you have to share with somebody else in authority just because of the nature of the issue that you are being receiving information on. And then finally, I would suggest that this person needs to be and portray a good example. Because as all teachers, we are models, right? We are modeling our Christian behavior and ethical behavior, and we need to be able to be a good testimony in front of the students and young people that we come in contact with. Now, very quickly, let me talk to you about what I call the roles of a guidance counseling position. What are the roles of this individual? And there are basically three major roles. There is an administrative role. In fact, I would say a guidance counselor kind of parallels to a certain degree a school leadership position. It could be an assistant principal, an associate leader within the school who is helping the school leader and so on. And so they kind of work hand in hand to be able to fulfill the responsibilities of the school. Number two, we talked about counseling, and I'm going to suggest, and we'll dig into this a little bit deeper in a moment, but there are really four types of counseling that a guidance counselor needs to be involved in. Number one, there is what we call academic counseling, and we'll define that and go into that in a little bit more detail. There is what we call vocational counseling, all right? Being able to have conversations with Johnny or Susie about, okay, what are you to do the rest of your life? Okay? You know, sometimes young people, they really like, I have no clue, you know, and I'm a junior or senior, and I'm getting ready to graduate, and I have no clue as to where I'm going. So that leads me then to specifically job preparation or college preparation counseling. And probably this is where mom and dad are really looking for your guidance and for your wisdom on how to help Johnny make right choices as they are considering what comes after 12th grade, after graduation. And we'll dig deeper into that in just a few minutes. And then finally, I'd like to suggest that there is what is called personal counseling. All right? It's when, you know, a child comes into your office and they just have that burden and they just need somebody to talk to about an issue that's going on in their personal lives or maybe in their family, or it's interpersonal with other students in the school, and you just need to be able to sit down, have that listening ear, and be able to provide wisdom and guidance and whatever. So there are multi-categories of counseling responsibilities that need to take place and be available by this role. But, and finally, clerical. Forgot about there's the third one. Clerical. Most of your schools probably have some type of what we call a student information system, an SIS, or it may be called a student management system, where you are putting data into a computer to be able to print out report cards, to create transcripts, and so on. And so this person either is doing that or is overseeing that. This person is helping in the area of maintaining what we used to call cumulative records back in the day, and now all of this is done digitally in our schools, but someone is making sure that this is done accurately and all the files that are necessary, especially if the state was to come in and want to see immunization records or attendance records. Every state's different and what the expectations are. You're able to present that information to those authorities. Now, I've just given you the job description of that person or that role, and we're all sitting here looking at each other and saying, I wish, and we know reality sets in that we cannot afford that person. So then but we can't just pretend that it goes away, that we're not going to do it. We have to do it, Because we are a service organization, we are providing a service to our stakeholders, primarily our parents and our students. We have to do it, so then the question is, who is going to do it? All right? So solution number 2 then is what I call sharing the responsibilities with others. Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask, do you have questions or comments about anything I've said so far? Make sense? You tracking? All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go through what I call the administrator's checklist, the guidance checklist. And there are actually 9 large buckets, if you will, that really need to be covered. And I promise that most of you are probably doing this already. Okay? But these are what we would call the 9 buckets of pupil personnel services. And by the way, when I use the term pupil personnel services, it is not just the pupil, but it's the parent and the pupil, okay? So mom and dad and the child, they're linked, okay? And so we're not only serving the student, but we're also serving the parents as well. So keep that in mind. This is not specifically just for the student. All right, so the first bucket is what we call orientation services. Orientation services. So I know on your handout you kind of have a bullet list underneath each of these, and so I want to kind of summarize them together with you just so that you understand some of the things that are up on the screen here. All right, so first of all, admission. Mr. and Mrs. Jones knock on your door. Their child, Caleb, wants to come to your school. All right? So I know that you have admissions protocols that you are going to follow in order to determine whether you're going to accept Caleb or not into your school. Now, whether you're an open enrollment or closed enrollment school is going to dictate as to what those policies are. But regardless of that, hopefully you're going to look at academics, you're going to look at character references, you're going to have an interview with mom and dad, with Caleb. You're going to let them know what your expectations are as a school and so on. So that falls in this bucket of orientation services. But once you make a decision about whether Caleb can or cannot come to your school, let's say that you do accept him, then it doesn't stop there. Because then we are going to provide printed information to Caleb and his parents as to what it means to come to school, as far as back to school orientation services, whether you're a school uniform, have to purchase uniforms, whatever the case may be. There will be back to school parent meetings, and so those have to be organized. They have to happen. There's going to be a parent-student handbook that has to be created and should be updated on an annual basis to be able to get that information into mom and dad's hands. There will be meetings with the students when the students come back to school as we're orienting them to a new school year. And then throughout the school year, there will be parent-teacher meetings that happen. All of these things are part of what we call orientation services, and all of these are really in the bucket of pupil personnel services. This is where we are servicing the pupil and his or her parents in the onboarding, the application acceptance onboarding of the child into your school, and trying to create a successful experience for the student and so on. And so in order for this to happen, it takes time and energy, it takes effort. Somebody has to do it. And by the way, can I suggest to you that one of the best marketing tools for your school is not printing brochures. It is not putting an ad in the paper. It is not even necessarily your website, even though that's important. But probably the best marketing tool your school can have is a satisfied parent. All right? And so if you do a good job here in making that parent feel welcomed and accepted and helping the parent and the child be prepared to come into your school. And then as the year progresses, you are helping the parent and the child to be successful and to navigate obstacles or whatever the case may be. What you're doing is you're creating a positive relationship with that parent and their child, and that parent is more than likely to talk to coworkers and to neighbors and friends and say, by the way, my child is at XYZ Christian school. They're having an incredible time, and he is so got accustomed and acclimated to the school, and that is the way to really grow your school population. All right? Okay, so orientation services, who can help? Well, if you do have assistant leadership, obviously you can delegate information there. Obviously, school secretary or other faculty members can be very helpful in these areas. If you have a parent-teacher association where you can provide maybe some responsibilities to parents, existing school parents, to set up evening events and to cater and whatever the case may be, it is thinking strategically about these things that must happen. Who is going to help me as the school leader to do them? By the way, can I suggest something to you? You cannot do everything. All right? As much as you would like to think that you're Superman and you can do everything to make your school run successfully, you cannot do that. And so you've got to be able to reach out and to task other people within your organization to come alongside and to help you to be successful. All right, number 2, let's talk about counseling. We've already talked about, in general, student counseling. Remember, I said there were 4 primary areas. There's academic counseling, there's vocational counseling, there is college preparation counseling, and then there's just plain old biblical counseling or just problem solving. These are all the primary issues that you have to be able to navigate as you're working with your students. But you know what? There is another area of counseling that is really, really kind of unique in the Christian school world, is because we are not just interested in Johnny, we're also interested in Johnny's mom and dad. Okay? Because if Johnny's mom and dad aren't going to church someplace, if you're a church-related school, wouldn't it be wonderful if they would come to your church and they would get involved in the ministry at your church? Or maybe Johnny's parents are going through a divorce, or maybe Johnny's dad lost his job, or whatever the case may be. Then as a ministry, you will come alongside these folks and you want to aid and support them spiritually. And so there's a whole other area of family counseling, where you're reaching out and you are touching the lives of mom and dad and helping them in these difficult times of life. All right? So who's going to help in these areas? Well, again, if you have assistant leadership or you can task certain faculty, if you are a covenant school where you are connected to a church, then I would encourage you to draw pastors into, especially in family counseling, or if there's a youth pastor or whatever, that can help provide services or connections in those areas. So it takes some burden off of you as a school leader when you've got people that can help in these areas, because you don't want to just let these difficult areas, just happen and we're not reaching out and touching and providing whatever support we can. That should not happen. So you want to make sure you have the right people available to make these things happen. Okay, let's talk about educational and vocational planning. All right, so especially as the child is getting up into high school, there is something called graduation requirements. And every state is a little bit different, and obviously you need to know what the state expectations are for your school and what students getting a diploma from your school are needing to have in order to get that diploma. So usually it's so many units of English, so many units of math, maybe foreign language, social studies, the list goes on. And then you may add on top of that, maybe certain units of Bible or whatever that you have as your own Christian school. So what happens if Tom fails English? All right? So do you have a way for Tom to make that up? Or are they held back? And what do you do to navigate some of those issues in your school? So you need to be able to sit down with Tom and say, listen, in order to graduate, you have to have this. And so you failed ninth grade English. How do we rectify that problem? How do we solve that situation? And so there has to be a conversation that takes place. You may have certain GPA requirements for your students. And so you've got to be able to talk through those. You obviously, or not obviously, but in many cases, you will have honors. So a student can graduate with honors, maybe it's valedictorian or salutatorian, and so it's making sure students are aware of that and being able to navigate that so there's no hurt feelings or I didn't understand, the situation when it comes to the end of their high school career. Then, of course, college counseling. Young people today really have several what I call career paths when they leave your school. You've got obviously going to two-year college or four-year college, and we could spend a lot of time talking about those two career paths. Then you've got students who may go into the military, and then you've got students who may choose to go into a trade. And they want to learn to be an electrician or a welder or something like that. And then you may have students who say, I just want a job. Let me go to McDonald's, okay? And so what you've got to do then is be able to sit down and have a conversation with these young people, because unfortunately sometimes young people, if they're not really thinking about what is next, let me put it to you this way. They may be thinking about tomorrow, but they're not thinking about 10 years from now, okay? And so it's helping them to make appropriate decisions now in light of where they would like to be 5 years, 10 years down the road. And of course, mom and dad are going to speak into this. There's other influencers that are going to speak into this, but you're the one that has a lot of contact with these young people. And I would encourage that you or somebody is sitting down and having some deep conversations with these young people and helping them to think through that. So we talked about college counseling, vocational counseling, and then if you have the opportunity, I would encourage you to offer some type of interest aptitude testing. When I was administrator, we gave what we call the ASVAB test. It's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Obviously, the military is using that because they're trying to find good people to come and to be in the service, but they will provide this testing at no cost to your school and no cost to students. They will provide a report, and basically that report becomes a good discussion starter, because it's going to measure a student's ability, usually in verbal and math, and then it's going to ask a lot of questions, and then it's going to, based upon their academic scores and also likes and dislikes, is going to make suggestions as to where they potentially could fit. And all my kids took it, and some of the results were like, no, that is not an option, all right? But at least started a conversation. And so that might be something that you would consider just because it's free. There are others that cost money that you could consider doing as well. But I always like to do this just because I would sit down with the students on an individual basis and we would debrief. And we would talk through, and it was interesting on how light bulbs would go off and go, I never thought about that. And so having those kinds of conversations. All right, so again, other leadership within your school. If you have a librarian that can help with keeping maybe information about colleges that could be available for students to look, like college catalogs, although everything's online now, but being able to point them in the right direction. If you have a senior class sponsor, having that person to be able to be tasked with having these conversations, again, PTA leaders, your secretary, and so on. These are all people that could aid or help in some of these areas. All right, informational services. So we've already touched on high school graduation requirements, and so again, making sure that mom and dad and parents, this really should be part of your parent-student handbook. You should have an academic section in your handbook where it's very clear as to what is expected of Johnny to be able to graduate from your school. Because there's nothing more than having an upset parent at the end of senior year when in their mind they're expecting something and it doesn't happen. And then you have to have those difficult conversations as to why it didn't happen. Now, I mentioned here university entrance testing. Obviously, the two large testing is the ACT or the SAT, but there's also a third one now called the CLT, the Classic Learning Test. It primarily is utilized by classical schools, but it is now a test that is being recognized by most colleges and universities. But I would encourage young people to at least take the SAT, ACT, or the CLT at least one time. What I told my children is that they had to take it at least one time. Because again, it helped me as a parent, but also as a school leader, to be able to have some sense of where that young person was. What were their strengths, their academic strengths, or weaknesses? Because you may have a child that comes in and sits in your office and say, you know what, I want to be a doctor. And they're failing science, okay? And so somehow you need to sit down and talk to Johnny and say, okay, Johnny, you know, we look at your test scores, we look at your grades. This may not be the best career path for you. So let's talk about some other opportunities and so on. But at least you have some data to back up that conversation. Now, obviously, you're not going to be the decider of what Johnny ends up doing, but at least you can say, I gave him appropriate information to be able to help him make those decisions. Again, having a supply of university or college catalogs, or at least being able to point the student to the right direction to get the information that they need. I would encourage you as a school to make decisions as to who you as a school would recommend young people to consider. Now, you're not going to be able to control where they end up going, okay? But as a school, I would encourage you to recommend a certain school or schools, and then encourage those schools to come and recruit on your campus, or take college trips to those schools so young people can actually see what it's like to go to or experience college. And what we have found at the university is that we have a lot better luck in recruiting a student and getting them to come if they have visited the campus. And so we strongly encourage college visits. Those do tend to make a difference in the decision-making process. All right, let's talk about scholarship information, application requirements. By the way, did you know that college costs money? All right, and so probably that's what mom and dad are thinking about. How am I going to pay for this? All right, and yet I would like to suggest to you that there are resources out there, but you have to work for them. Okay, you have to dig for them. And so it's going online, it's being able to find what resources. In fact, I have read, I can't confirm this, but I have read that there is literally millions of dollars that go unawarded every year because the money is just not asked for. Students don't take the time to fill out applications for particular scholarships or certain awards and so on. Because many times, they have to write an essay, or they have to fill out a questionnaire, or whatever the case may be. And so it's finding these resources and pointing the students to them and encouraging them and helping them to be able to make this happen. Now, one of the big ones that especially mom and dad are going to need some help, especially with a first child, is if they're going to a school that receives federal funding, then they're going to have to fill out the FAFSA form. Federal aid, I forget what the rest of the word means, okay? But it is confusing the first time around for parents. And so you either need to understand or you need to be able to bring a resource into the school that can help the parents. What I used to do as a school administrator is that I would have, usually in the fall, probably about this time of year, I would have a meeting for all of my seniors and their parents. And it'd be in the evening, have refreshments and so on, and we would talk about choices and decisions that need to be made in preparation for next fall. Because there are deadlines attached to college entrance applications. There's deadlines for filling out the FAFSA and getting that done. There's deadlines for other loans and awards and so on. And so early in the fall, we would have that meeting. We would go over that information, and either I would do it or I would bring somebody in who could have that conversation with mom and dad and help them to be able to understand these expectations. So we've talked about scholarship resources. All right, again, leadership. If you have a librarian that can help keep track of all of this information, or start looking and finding information to be able to share with students, that would be helpful. Senior class sponsor, secretary. Notice I say off-campus support because there are even banks and other financial organizations that will provide this service to your school, and they can come in and talk about some of these things with your parents and with your students. Very quickly, job placement. This is not really a big deal. But what we did as a Christian school when I was in North Carolina is that we would actually have employers reach out to us and look to hire high school students for summer employment. And what better way for a young person to understand or whether they have an interest or a propensity to a certain job field than to try it out, okay? And by the way, I don't require it, but I encourage my college students to do that, okay? Obviously, college students are looking to raise money to be able to come back to school. I get that. But what better way than to work in a entity that trains children, like a child development center, or a school that has a summer program to be able to, really, is this something I want to do the rest of my life, working with children in an educational setting. And so being able to provide that information or those experiences with young people would be helpful. And then possibly permanent jobs after high school. You could be a connection point, especially if a student is not going to go to college, but they just want to go into the workforce. Maybe you can be that person that can make those connections with potential employers. All right, follow-up programs. Now, this is a bucket that sometimes we don't think about, but I think it's an extremely important bucket. And this is what I call follow-up programs. I'm not sure whether your school has any type of an alumni association, but can I suggest to you that keeping in contact with your grads and finding out what their success stories are when they leave your institution, you should be highlighting those, because that is a great marketing tool for you. If you have a student that goes off to college and they're successful and then they go into a certain career field, bringing that student back and sharing their testimony with your current students is a great idea, or maybe posting that on your social media or whatever. We do that as an institution all the time. We are constantly reaching out to our grads, and we're referencing their success stories, because that's a great way to attract future students in our situation. Public relations, of course, is big, because you are situated in a community that a lot of people may know or may not know about you, or they may know wrong information about you. Okay, and it's being able to communicate out to people within your community. I know, and I keep referencing North Carolina, but when I was in North Carolina, I was connected with the Nash County Realtors Association. And I was constantly putting information in the hands of realtors in North Carolina that when new families moved into our community and bought houses, they obviously knew that there was a public school system, but did they necessarily know there was a Christian school? And I wanted them to be able to get that information. And so I would make sure that the realtors in our community knew about our school. And so I would go to the Chamber of Commerce, talk to them about our school and what the opportunities were and so on. And so public relations is huge as you're trying to look at how to build your school into the future. Designated giving programs. A lot of schools now are employing or have someone that they call advancement officers within their school. These are people that are looking on how to financially support the school, because the budget can only go so far based upon tuition. All right, so if you're looking to be able to do a building program, or you're looking to be able to do something special, maybe with athletics or fine arts or whatever the case may be, where you're going to have to raise money to be able to make that happen, having someone on your staff who can help let that be their focus, it will be extremely helpful to you as a school leader. And then don't forget second generation enrollment. Now, our school had been around for 50 years. And so now we were having children of our graduates now ready to come to school. That's why an alumni association is so important. Because you want to be able to reach out to your alumni and encourage them to consider their alma mater as a place to send their children. And so keeping them involved and keeping them connected to your school is so important. And so somebody needs to spearhead that. Now, obviously, in the world in which we live today, social media is a great way to consider that. And so, whether you have a website, I hope you do, because a website is the best way to showcase your school. By the way, if you have a website, please keep it current. All right? One of the most frustrating things for me is to go on a school's website and find that the calendar of events is 2 years old. Okay? Because what does that tell me as a prospective parent? That you're not detail oriented at all. And you can read a lot by looking at a school's website. And so I recommend that you have a website, but I recommend that you keep your website current with fresh pictures, fresh information, stories about what's going on at your school, activities, field trips, so on. That is what is going to draw people to your school. But guess what? Somebody's got to do that. Okay? And so it's finding the right people to be able to make that happen. Secretary, business office, personnel. By the way, if your school has a school board, put those people to work. Okay? Their role should not just be to come once a month to sit in a meeting. If they're on the board of your school, then they have a vested interest. They are a stakeholder. And so therefore, as a stakeholder, they should assume responsibility. And so maybe you've got a banker on your school board. Then I would encourage them to consider being your advancement officer. Because they probably have connections where they can begin conversations with people who might be willing to donate money to your school. All right, curriculum study. We've talked about graduation requirements. College entrance, we've talked about that. Now, this is getting into the nitty-gritty of curriculum, but again, decisions need to be made regarding textbooks, what textbooks you're going to use, who's going to teach what class, how you're going to recruit appropriate teachers. Are those teachers qualified to be in your school? Now, obviously, that falls on the shoulders of leadership, but maybe you can farm some of that information out, or if you have a mentor teacher or an instructional coach within your school, that would be a great person. If you're looking at adding new programs of study, maybe you're going to offer honors English or advanced AP English or those kinds of levels of training. What does that mean? What are the expectations? Who's going to make sure that it's being done correctly, and so on. So obviously the faculty are going to be important, and then other people within leadership in your school. Now, we're running out of time here, but I want to hit this one very carefully. Your school should have some kind of testing program, because data speaks. You want to make, as leadership, you want to make intentional decisions. You want to make informed decisions, okay? And the way you do that is by collecting data. And where does that data come from? Well, most schools will have some kind of a standardized testing program where on an annual basis you are testing what students know, and then you're able to compare that with students within AACS, because you can do that comparative study, but also you can compare against the public, okay, the nation, and see where you're at. By the way, that's a great marketing tool for you. But it also gives you the opportunity to be able to make decisions about your school, and maybe you need to change curriculum, maybe you need to improve things in a certain area, and so on. So a school-wide testing program, achievement and mental ability, I think you should be doing both of those. Vocational interest aptitude test, we talked about that. Providing guidance and follow-up for specialized testing. Now, you as a school may not give a testing for students who may have learning disabilities, but you should be able to recommend to parents where they can get those testing. And typically, most of the districts or counties within your state, I know in North Carolina, they are required to service our students, and then the results would be sent back to the parent, which would share them with me. But again, parents may come to you and say, I don't understand what this means. Can you help me? You've got to be able to help. You've got to be able to answer questions like that. And so you need to be familiar with guidance and follow-up for specialized testing. All right, finally, our time is gone. But again, this is just the whole area of information gathering and protection, and being able to keep the information of your school. So how do you secure applications, emergency information, academic transcripts? By the way, an academic transcript is a very formal way for you to communicate to a parent or to another school or a college how a student has done in your school. It is actually a legal document. All right, so it needs to be accurate and it needs to be explanatory. In other words, somebody who's getting that needs to understand what they're seeing. Cumulative records, disciplined records, health immunization records, attendance records, testing information, personal information about your students, and so on. A lot of times this now has become digitized. You have computer systems that will do this for you. Back in the day, it was all done paper, and we actually had cumulative folders. We don't have that anymore, but this is, again, the responsibility of someone within your school to be able to make all of this happen. And again, many hands make light work. So don't ignore what has to be done. All of it has to be done, but how are we going to do it, and who's going to help in the process? Thank you very much.